How's it going, everybody? My name is Will from Ghost Hack, and today I have kind of an interesting tutorial for you. I'm going to show you how to make this bass out of just a kick drum with some post-processing. And then I'm going to show you how I turned it into this bass. Alright, so essentially what I did to create the main sound was take a kick drum, put a bunch of post-processing on it, and then make it really short and loop it very fast. Now the first thing I would do in order to kind of record and, use this sound would be to go into your project settings here and change the time base as high as you can go. If your computer can handle it all the way at 960, then that's good, because that's going to drastically affect the way that, the whole thing loops together. It's going to make it a lot smoother because we're working with really small areas of sound here. So we just have this one kick drum. It just loops. It's just a hip hop kick drum. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to adjust this length. You see now I'm shortening it. And since we're on a looping section right here in the song, the whole thing is going to go fast. And listen to what happens when I bring the length down so it's like cutting up in the middle of the kick. We have something resembling kind of a bass sound because it's just this table just circulating over and over and over. So this is basically, we're using it almost like a wavetable, and we're just finding the right spot to just loop over and over again in this playlist. And what we're going to do first is we're going to route it right into one, where we're going to start by, I just started by putting a limiter on it. That's not even necessary because it's never going to go over that threshold, so you can honestly just skip that. The next thing that I put on it is an OTT. OTT's free off the Xfer website. If you don't have it, I highly recommend you get it. It's extremely useful. And you can really see I'm bringing up the mid band and the low band, everything else here, the depths all the way up. I did bring the time down a little bit, but I'm really just cramming it through this OTT, because I wanted to bring out all of those harmonics with the OTT. So that's what that does. And now you can hear that it's a nice solid sound. However, it doesn't sound Reese at all. The first sound that I went over sounded kind of Reese. It had some motion to it. It was kind of wobbling back and forth. And this is where I'm going to use this plugin, the frequency shifter from Full Buckets. Now this is a free plugin. Again, I recommend you go find it and download it, because it is very good and it's very useful in a lot of situations. And essentially I can show you exactly what I did here. Basically, I went into the presets and hit initial preset, and that'll pretty much bring up these exact settings except for a couple of things. First thing I did was change it from 5 to 50. So it has, more of a range, a 50 hertz range of frequency shifting. And then using these knobs right here, we can control the actual frequency shifting that the thing is doing. So right now it's at like 12.9. If it was at 0, then it would sound like this. The same, because we're doing absolutely no frequency shifting. But now when I bring it down to like 12.9, you can hear what happens. We have a little bit of wobbling motion. There's a little bit of volume wobbling, and it's hard to hear at this point, but I'll go back because the next stuff we're going to add is like some effects such as a lot of saturation, which is really going to bring out that movement. And I'll come back to this after that and show you, the drastic effect that this actually has on the sound. So the next thing up is SerumFX, which is free if you have Serum, but you could do this with other plugins as well. Basically what I'm doing is I'm using the hyperdimension to just add some extra voices. I have it on 7. You can see where I have these controls, and then I have the chorus going as well, with tight delays, the depth down a little bit. This is just adding a little bit of width, a little more voices, and you can hear what that does to make it a little more stereo wide. And next up, I threw on a soft clipper, which looks exactly like this. All right, I just manipulated these two knobs to look exactly like this, which is going to thicken up the sound a little bit. And then after that, I added another soft clipper. And another soft clipper, and a final soft clipper. So now we really have a nice distorted sound going on here. And this is where you can also decide to, mix in or turn off or turn on the chorus and unison stuff that we're doing in this SerumFX. You can decide to mix it in however you please. And now if we go back to this frequency shifter, we can really hear the wobbling that's going on here. So let's bring this back up to 0, and we can hear that there's no wobbling. It's just the same thing the whole time. And now let's move this guy down so we can hear a little bit of the wobbling that it's doing. Now it has motion, and I liked it at 12.9. You can move this around. I might even automate this, you know what I'm saying? But that's just a good thing to have, a good way of controlling the speed of that sort of Reesing motion. And now this is where controlling the length is basically going to control kind of the pitch of where the Reese bass is. Now most of this will be atonal because we're not actually playing it on a keyboard. So I'm just kind of messing around eyeballing this length. So essentially what I think I want to do here is I want to just record myself doing that. I want to go into this Edison that I have right here on the track, which just has a kick drum in it, and then record myself just doing some weird things with this length right here. And once we have it recorded, then I'm going to take it through and I'm going to make it, you know, that neuro-y kind of Reese bass that you heard in the beginning. So I just want to go on input and then let me record and mess around with this guy. All right, I think we got some good little things going on in here, and that's very loud. We're gonna go ahead and drag this just right in here. Yeah, and there's our sound. There's our Reese bass, and you can see exactly what we've been doing with that. Let's go ahead and mute this guy, and now let's find the good spots that we want to use. All right, so these are the two sections that I decided to grab in this, where I was playing some nice, you know, a mix of high and low action here, and it kind of sounds like it has tone to it. And now we're going to post-process that to become, you know, a more complex kind of Reese sound. So let's route this guy into track 2, and let's go over these first steps to doing this. So the first thing that we're going to do is take an EQ. And if you ever watched Seamless R's videos on doing these sort of basses, then you may kind of, you know, recognize the technique that I'm about to do. But what I want to do first off is I want to create a bandpass, something like this, that I can control in that manner, and I want to adjust like the tightness of it. And we have some nice vowel-y action going on there. I want to automate that. So I'm going to go ahead, right click this and create an automation clip. And now I'm just going to create a shape to kind of go along with this. And this can just be sort of random. You can record this out if you want. You can draw it in. You can do whatever you please just to make a shape that's sort of just random and moving around, and then we can edit it. Like I, for example, think it needs to be going a little bit faster than that. And also what you can do is you can control the minimum and maximum times. Like let's say if I wanted to bring up this minimum time, then I would even up all the way to halfway, then the majority of the modulation would be just in this top area. I made it very high, and if I wanted to do the opposite, then I would have the majority of the modulation in the low area. So you can find the spot that you like best for that. And of course, we're going to do multiband compression later, so this won't matter quite as much. But the next thing I want to do is create some notch filters. I think I actually want to use this in a different EQ. I think it's going to be easier to visualize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a notch filter like this. I'm going to bring it up to, yeah, maybe like that. You know, we'll figure it out later. I'm going to make a notch filter. I'm going to do exactly the same thing, just up like this. And then I'm going to do it like this as well. And so now we have this shape. And my next goal is to automate these notch filters to do different things. So I'm going to create an automation clip for this one. I'm going to create an automation clip for this one. And I'm going to create an automation clip for this one. And we're going to do similar things in the sense that we're just going to make sort of random-esque patterns, and we're going to do it that way and just see where it takes us. And so these are the notch filters, and those shapes are pretty random, so I don't know how well it's going to be right off the bat, but we can take a listen to it and watch what they're doing. All right, I actually liked what they were doing right there. I think it sounded pretty cool, but I want it to be a little, I want it to be a little higher in some parts. Like I want this to go up a little more. I want this to be up higher sometimes, like all the way at the top, so we have some more, kind of a bigger effect there. And I think the next thing I want to add is just a little bit of a phaser here. You can see I brought the stereo down all the way, and I've adjusted the frequency and the max and the mid to kind of just phaser around the area to make a little more, to give it a little more movement. Just makes it seem a little more alive. So let's bring the feedback down a little bit. Let's just mix it in. All right, and the next thing we're going to add in this chain is a Maximus, where we're going to really compress each band. So let's go into these bands and find their spots. Especially in the lows, we want to really hard compress it, just like this, so we can really see it up there. Like that. And let's do the same for the mids. Although the mids are almost always present. And now we can do it for the highs. And once we do it to the whole thing, we get a very consistent sound here. So let's turn down this output gain a little bit so we can control it. And then I'm going to actually open up a Vocodex, and this is going to add a nice effect to the overall kind of bass we have. It's going to make it a little juicier. So to start off, it just sounds like this. I don't really like that sound, so I'm going to bring these bands down to 20. Having low bands when you're, running basses through a Vocodex tends to work out pretty well. And then I'm going to bring the bandwidth here. I'm going to bring it up. And you can hear we're already getting kind of a juicy, sort of greasy, almost plastic quality. It's hard to describe the sounds that can come out of Vocodex, but they're there and they're cool. I'm going to bring this down to RMS instead of peak, so it's going to be a little bit slower and easier to handle. And now we can just mess around with these knobs. Like we can mess around with the order and this modulator, like band multiplier, and we can mess with this pitch and the chorus and stuff like that. It's just to see what we get. And now I just straight up turned these all the way up, and the chorus on 5 as well. And I just left the order at 2, and that's pretty much all I've done so far. I think I want to kind of mess around with this part a bit, maybe make some changes here. Because it can get kind of harsh in that high end. So if I just bring this down with an interesting kind of dip. And after the Vocodex, the next thing I'm going to add, this is just a touch, this doesn't have to be done, is going to be the phaser and the compressor just in SerumFX. What I've done with the phaser is brought the rate, depth, and frequency down, feedback down a little bit too. I'm just mixing it in so it kind of sounds like almost a guitar amp frequency spectrum. And then I just mix it in. And obviously I brought this compressor up a lot just to make sure that everything's being brought up. And I brought the release down. And now the next thing I'm going to do is just take an EQ. I'm going to drop down around 200 Hertz because I think it gets a little resonant-y and it's a little strange. And then I'm going to drop down around 3K as well because it gets a little piercing. And then the last thing I'm going to do for this is just add a little bit of Maximus here. And this is going to be doing similar stuff to the thing we did in the Maximus before, where I'm just compressing the lows really hard, compressing the mids nice and hard, compressing the highs decently, bringing them down a little bit, and just making sure the master is at full volume as well. And then some people as an accent like to add a little bit of reverb in here. I made the size small and the decay really low, so it's just a really tight verb. It's just as an accent, it's not really reverberating that much. But people like to do that on their basses as well sometimes, just to really give it a little more atmosphere and a little more depth. But another important thing about what we've done here is that we have all this automation, and we can change this automation any way that we want it, and we can make all new stuff. So at the beginning of the session, we made this sound with just a kick drum and post-processing. And now running that sound through another channel, we were able to create this sound. So thank you guys so much for watching. I know this tutorial was a little bit unconventional, but hopefully it gave you, some ideas and some inspiration for, making kind of experimental Reese drum and bass kind of basses like this. Because this sound really was created just by a sampler and then post-processing that with other plugins. You don't need to have, super fancy VSTs like Serum or Harmor or other things in order to generate sounds that are useful, especially when you're getting creative with the post-processing. You can do a lot with just a small, easy concept, just like sampling. And just imagine what I could do if I could take this sound and then run it through another channel doing exactly the same thing. There's infinite possibilities. The more layers you stack, the more interesting the sound can get. So don't forget to subscribe for more music tutorials, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.